Chapter 3. After a week of hallway locker meetings, Collie and Bancroft decided to meet at Collie's house. Bancroft showed up at 6 p.m. as promised. She wasn't fond of the idea of having anyone from school in her home, but after she found out where Bancroft lived, this was a more agreeable location. She was beginning to like her partner more by the minute. He was proving his competence in mechanics, and he had extremely good instincts with software. It looked like she wouldn't have to do everything alone this time. They sat on the back porch, reviewing the proposal she put together the week before. Bancroft agreed with the majority of her setup, but had some adjustments he wanted to make, other ideas of where they could improve the project. She was intrigued by the fact he actually offered to help. The sliding door opened and her father came out. "So, I hear you're new at Pifianka Academy," he said as he put down a tray of snacks. "Yes, sir," Bancroft said. "I don't much like the people though, except for Collie, of course." He flashed her a smile and she refrained from rolling her eyes. "Well, I'm sure Collie can introduce you to her friends." He smiled and patted his daughter on the shoulder. Collie cast her eyes down. "She's made so many since we moved here last year." Collie hoped the silence would tell her father he needed to leave. "Well, I'll let the two of you get back to work." Bancroft smiled back and watched as her father returned to the house. When the door closed behind him, Bancroft spoke. "I take it he's unaware of the pranks that take place at school. What part of the proposal did you want to change?" She quickly diverted the subject. Bancroft watched her closely. "Where did you move from?" Collie sighed inwardly. She knew he meant well, but she really didn't want to talk about herself. "I think we should just work on the project." She poked her pencil at the papers in front of her. "All right." He turned to his bag, pulling out a folder with drawings of robed men with outstretched arms and balls of light coming from their hands. Collie squinted to get a better look, but Bancroft opened the folder, denying her further exploration. He riffled through a number of rough sketches she couldn't make out. Then he produced several pages of scribbled notes. "Here it is. I think we should make something different from what everyone else is making." He waved his papers as he spoke. "Everyone is designing a standard robot or self-flying contraption. I'm assuming that's what was covered last semester." Collie pursed her lips in agreement, nodding fervently. "Right. So, I've been working on plans over the summer break. Just after I took my aptitude tests and found out I was coming to the academy, I did some research on the school. A friend of my dad's also attended, so I talked to him about what it was like and he told me we would be making our own creations. He and his partner had made this spider thing. He showed me pictures and it was pretty cool. So I thought I would get a jump on working out a project. I love drawing and all that stuff. I'm pretty good with the software end of things as well. I heard you got top marks in mechanics, and I was so stoked when I found out we would be working together. You know, you can build and I can program." Bancroft was starting to talk more quickly as he went along. Collie was amused by his excitement but also slightly annoyed at his trailing off topic. "When I read your proposal about building a robot with wings, I thought it was cool but too close to what everyone else would be doing. So, I made some adjustments to my original drawings and worked out a new part of the proposal. Just the part explaining what we intended to make. That would be 70% of my proposal." Collie was annoyed and did nothing to hide it. "You're right, and I'm sorry, but I think this new plan will blow everyone else out of the water." He was still waving his paperwork around, so Collie finally reached up and snatched it. "Sorry about my handwriting." She stared at Bancroft, giving a silent command to stop talking. As she made her way through his papers, she thought he was right to apologize. His handwriting was atrocious. But then her eyebrows shot up in surprise. She gaped up at him and he smiled widely. "You want to make a dragon?" "Yeah. I think it would be amazing." We can program it to fly and breathe water. Water? What kind of dragon would breathe water? Her brow crinkled with confusion. None that I know of, but it's so obvious it would breathe fire. So, if it was water instead, no one would ever expect it. His grin was wider than before. And you made this over the summer? She was impressed despite still being somewhat mad he had changed everything. Not exactly, no. I drew a lizard, but when I saw your idea of adding wings I thought a dragon would be perfect. I just added in the water thing a couple days ago. I had a dream you were standing on a hill with a little creature on your shoulder. It had wings and a long, pointy tail. It was a shade of silver blue and glistened in the light. When I woke up I had to write it down. I thought then of how perfect it would be to add wings. It would only take a little tweaking and then make the tail more pointy. Bancroft shuffled through the thin tissue paper, placing the drawings on top of each other to reveal a hidden image. Collie didn't think his smile could get any wider. She looked down at the drawings, which were remarkable, but she was thinking about something else. He said, "You had a dream about me?" Her eyebrow quirked in mild interest. No, not you, per se. Well, maybe it was you. It was dark you. No, like a silhouette. Noting his extreme discomfort, she decided to let the topic go. I thought you were a software guy? She looked back down at the drawings. These are unbelievable. Thanks. I love to draw, always have. I'm not great at drawing schematics, though. I mean, I can hold my own, but when it comes to making blueprints for a project, I'm not so great. He shrugged as if embarrassed. That's okay. I'm pretty good at that. I'll take these, she said, shuffling together the thin sheets of paper and reaching for the remainder of his proposal. Then I'll rewrite the proposal. You don't like how I wrote it? The look on his face and tone of voice showed his annoyance. Collie looked up at him, taken aback. No, it's not that. Your handwriting makes it really hard to read. So I'll rewrite it before handing it in. And I thought I would take the drawings to start working out the inner mechanics of the device. Right, sorry. Of course. He waved his hand dismissively. I mean, it is 20% of our grade. No, you're right. She slowly ran her eyes over the drawings once again, eyebrows coming together as she drifted deep into thought. What is it? Do you want me to change the design? Your face is saying you're not too happy with the drawing. Well, I'm just not sure how to get it to breathe water. She looked up at him, completely confused. From the air. He shrugged as if it were obvious. The air? How would that work? Make it pull moisture from the air. Seriously? Collie was still perplexed. I have no idea how to do that. We have a year. Plus, if we can't figure it out, we can change the plans 2 months before it's due. That should give us enough time to work things out. Besides, I think the water breathing will fall mostly to the programming end of things. Once again she turned back to the drawings. So? Okay, I'll try to figure something out. I need to design the mechanics first. There's no guarantee our proposal will be accepted anyway. We may not even get to do this dragon. True, but that's not what I was going to say. Collie looked up at him. What were you going to say? Why did you tell your dad you have a bunch of friends? Why do you care? It's not that I care, I'm just curious is all. Collie clenched her teeth. Bancroft shifted, uncomfortable. Look, I'm sorry if I touched a nerve. I was just curious. She looked down at her pants and picked at a loose thread. Letting out a sigh, she said, My dad doesn't need to know the kids at school all hate me. He has enough to worry about. I'm sure they don't all hate you. Collie's nose crinkled as if she smelled something sour. What? There are a lot of kids at that school. There are exactly 278 students, and 277 hate me. Thanks to Jahala Almond. 276. He smiled at her. Who has two thumbs and doesn't hate you? He said, grinning wider and pointing his thumbs toward himself. This guy? Kali gave him a blank stare. Bancroft wiggled his thumbs and eyebrows, still wearing a goofy grin. You're so weird, she said, shaking her head and stifling a laugh. Chapter 4. On Kali's 18th birthday, her father pulled her out of school early so they could share some father-daughter time. They spent the day together every year, regardless of what was happening in their lives, but this year was different. Why do we have to go into the lab today, father? She whined. Arledge was making her father's life miserable and she no longer found pleasure in going to the lab. I need to check on just one project, then we can go. I promise it won't be more than a few minutes. Dragging her feet, Kali glanced through the laboratory windows as they passed by. Not everyone in the building worked on robots, some worked on new medicines and trying to find cures for whatever ailed the common man. When they finally reached to the robotics department, he turned to her. Wait here. I'll be right back. Kali nodded, her attention transfixed by some plans laid out on one of the tables. She looked around to see if anyone was nearby and, seeing the coast was clear, she slipped into the empty lab. Blueprints of one of the lab's new projects. Her father mentioned they were moving away from mechanical men now they had worked out the sensory issues. The issues she had fixed, unbeknownst to them, 2 months prior. Her fingers traced over the outlines of the design. She squinted. It's a bird, she whispered to herself. No, she studied it harder, tracing her fingers along the outer lines. The sketch was rough, but her eyes widened with the realization of what it was. It's a dragon. Kali clenched her jaw and gritted her teeth. I can't believe this. Looking closer, she took in the calculations for the dimensions. Although the design appeared to be the same as Bancroft's, it was missing important aspects. The motherboard and sensors were placed incorrectly, the wrong gears were being used, and the tail didn't have proper balance. This design would never work, would never fly. There wasn't even an exoskeleton. The question was, who had really come up with this design? She continued to trace the design on the blueprint, looking for the name of the draftsman, when her father stormed in. Kali! His voice echoed through the room. Sorry. I just wanted. He stomped toward her. You know better. I've told you time and time again to keep your hands off everything in the lab. Keeping his voice low, he dragged her out by her elbow. But that design, it's the same as my school project, she said, trying to explain. Nonsense. Arledge brought in that design several months ago. Long before you were given your assignment, he said, still keeping his voice low so as to not attract unwanted attention. I'm telling you, it's Bancroft's design. When they were finally clear of the building, he turned to her. Kali, I love you with every ounce of my being, but I'm already under review for the last stunt you pulled. I was only trying to help. Besides, what did I do that was so bad? Kali, you broke into the lab, changed the design schematics, and replaced the old CPU with a completely new one. Nobody saw me. You only found out because you caught me coming home and I confessed. She shrugged with a playful smile. You're not as smart as you sometimes think, daughter. Kali furrowed her brow, confused, so he continued. You left several of your tools behind and Arledge found them the next day. Surprised, Kali made no sound and only mouthed an "oh." He filed a formal complaint, stating you were trying to sabotage his work, which is why you are no longer allowed in the laboratory. She opened and closed her mouth in shock. Why had he not told her? But, father, I'm telling you, that's not Arledge's design. You two are not the first people to have considered building a dragon. This idea is not a new one, and that kind of design is certainly not new either. Do you think I wouldn't have checked on such a thing? I've seen your design plans, Kali, and fire breathing isn't the only difference between the two. Kali didn't know what to say. Her face was flush with heat, and she was certain it was as red as a beacon. I'm sorry. I guess I never thought of that. Come on, Kali.
Let's go.
I'll take you back to school. Her father started down the street. Kali jogged to catch up. But it's my birthday. We always spend my birthday together. I unfortunately have work to do. I was speaking to my boss. It seems they have a few things for me to take care of before the end of the week. He paused, his features softening as he looked at her. I'll make it up to you. There was something in his voice that concerned Kali and felt it reverberate from him. He was afraid. Whatever was happening at work, it had him stressed. She didn't want to add to his anxiety. I understand, Father. She took his hand. We'll do something this weekend. He smiled down at her and, cupping her face, kissed her on the forehead before again starting down the road. As soon as her father dropped her off, Kali found Bancroft in the cafeteria, talking with a few other students. Hey, Kali. I thought you were going. We need to talk. She glared down at him. Now. Okay. He stood up, throwing his bag over his shoulder and grabbing his tray. See you later, he said, addressing the table. Kali was already halfway out of the room when he put his tray back. He jogged to catch up, and when he rounded the corner she turned on him. You told me the dragon was your design. What? His brow furrowed in confusion. The dragon. You said you designed it over the summer. I did. Then how come I just found the exact same design on blueprints in my father's lab? She was jabbing him repeatedly in the chest with a finger. I don't know what you're talking about. Kali was jabbing so fast he had no time to respond to her accusations or to try and knock her finger away. Who? Did you get those drawings from? With each word she poked harder. Ouch. Bancroft finally grabbed her wrist, only to catch a slap from her other hand.
Zang, ge.
Look, I don't know what you're talking about. Like I said, I created a lizard over the summer. Then, when I saw your winged man, the idea of the dragon came to me. Now, if I let you go, will you stop poking and slapping me and talk about this rationally? Fine, she said, yanking her hands away. All right, let's go out to the yard and sit. You tell me what the heck is going on, he said, rubbing the spot she had been trying to bore through. I think that's going to leave a bruise, he said, following her outside. You'll live, she said over her shoulder. They both took a seat on a bench. Bancroft dropped his bag on the ground. Okay, talk me through whatever you were being hysterical about. I was not being hysterical. You were, trust me, he said, rubbing his chest to emphasize the point. My father took me to his lab today, and on one of the tables there was a sketch of our dragon. A rough sketch, but what it was couldn't be mistaken. Well, I'm telling you, our dragon is my design. Then how did it get into my father's lab? I only showed my drawings to one other person. My dad's friend Arlie. Arlie? Kali narrowed her eyes. Yeah, Arlie Askey. He and my dad have been friends for years. Arledge? Bancroft shrugged. Yeah, I guess, but I've only ever known him as Arlie. His brow furrowed. Are you saying he stole my designs? Why would he do that? Because he is beyond inept. Maybe we should talk to Mr. Métayer and let him know. See what he says. He might have some suggestions. No, we can't do that, she said. Why not? Because, if you haven't noticed, when it comes to robotics, Vlarley is a small town. If we tell Mr. Métayer about the dragon, it might get my father into trouble. Well, don't you think they're going to notice anyway? Like my father said, we aren't the first people to come up with the idea. But if we bring it to their attention, it could get my father in trouble and, well, there are a few differences between the dragons. What kind of differences? I only got a quick look, and it was in rough shape for a final approved draft, but from what I could see their dragon has a larger, sturdier housing cage, which will make it heavier. The shape and size of the wings are larger, the head is wider, and the tail is a different length with no inner gears to make it move. Also, theirs is a fire breather. That was a quick glance? She shrugged. Okay, then, business as usual? Bancroft asked. I guess so, yeah. She watched as he sat back on the bench, rubbing his chest. Sorry about the poking. She gave a weak smile. And slap. You slapped me too. Yes, I'm sorry I slapped you. Collie nudged him. They'd now been working together for 3 months and had become virtually inseparable. He was like a brother to her, and she his sister. She finally felt like she was home. Collie didn't realize how much she had truly missed having friends. She turned sideways on the bench to face him when she caught movement from the corner of her eye. Collie turned her head and sighed. Man. What? Bancroft sat up, following her gaze. Great. Losers. Jahala and her friends strolled into the clearing. Get kicked out of the building? Your stench finally get you banished? Her friends giggled. Clever, Akali said. Come up with that all on your own, or did you use your collective brain among the 4 of you? Did she just call us stupid? One of the girls asked. Well, if you have to ask. Kali shrugged. Whatever, loser. Jahala shoved her way past her 3 friends, but they stood glaring at Kali and Bancroft. Come on! Jahala yelled. The 3 girls scrambled to catch up. How did they get into this school? Bancroft asked. I mean, they barely keep up with any of the assignments. One or both of their parents are alumni. Sad, really, but what can you do? Kali stood, holding out a hand to Bancroft. Let's go. I'm starving. I never actually got to have my birthday lunch with my father. I was eating lunch and you made me throw it out, he said, taking her hand as she heaved him off of the bench. I'll buy you a cookie then. He smiled. Raisin nut? Yes, raisin nut.